Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? I'm Kris Swanson. I'm with Bolten, Menk. I've been an engineer with them for a little over 10 years. I'm licensed in 6 states, including Hawaii, which is kind of a nice one to have when a project comes up there. I get to go over there and do those projects. So I've been working in the Midwest on water and wastewater treatment, and have probably worked on well over 30 facilities in the upper Midwest. So I see a lot of different facilities, a lot of different treatment, big, small, water and wastewater end. I'm kind of going to touch on both today. I know we're in the wastewater track and we're going to be talking about salty water discharge, but I'm going to touch on a lot of water treatment concepts as well. Today I want to talk about salty water discharge in your wastewater and some of the new monitoring requirements that a lot of you guys have seen at your wastewater treatment plants. I want to talk about how that's related to your water treatment. I want to talk about how the water treatment causes the problem. I want to go through some definitions and regulatory things on the wastewater end, so you kind of understand where that's at. I want to talk about how water treatment can also help solve the problem. And with that, I'm going to look at an example or a project that I did for the city of St. Peter at their treatment facility and some of the results they've seen from them doing that treatment. Then I'll finish up with takeaway and any questions you guys would have. The problem that the PCA is looking at, why they're interested in having you guys monitor this, is salts that are going into the receiving streams. When I say salts, there's 3 main issues there. There's chlorides, sulfates, and then just dissolved solids, or what I'll refer to as total dissolved solids, and that's a measure of all different dissolved solids: calcium, magnesium, iron, any dissolved contaminants in the water or minerals in the water. The catch with these is they really don't break down. So if you're thinking about a lot of the things in your wastewater stream, phosphorus or nitrogen or BOD, or these things that you use biological treatments to take care of, those biological treatments won't deal with the salts. The salts are minerals that are in there, and they really don't go away with anything you can do. You just need to either keep them out of the waste stream, and that's what I'm going to concentrate on today, or concentrate them or separate them and take them to a different spot than the receiving stream. I noted on here that this is a nationwide issue because, I think a lot of people that I talk to are like, well, when's this coming from Minnesota? What are they doing? Are they real about wanting to monitor these salts and regulate these salts? And this is an issue that's nationwide. I was out in Phoenix last week for a membrane conference, a national membrane conference. There was half the presentations had to do with concentrate salt, salt in the drinking water down there, and how they do that, desalination plants, where to get rid of that salt, and just the buildup of salt, and how to deal with that, and how it's basically not good for organisms, obviously in the streams, to live in that. The place these salty discharges come in is obviously there's natural occurring salts in a lot of the water sources to varying degrees, and each of you have different amount of sulfates and chlorides and calcium and different things in your water stream. When it comes to wastewater, you're going to have the background levels in your raw water, and that's whatever you're pumping out of your well. And there's nothing you really can do about that. That's the geology that you're in your area of the state or your area of the country. But there's other things that do add to that. There's concentrated treatment technologies, such as cooling water blowdown, or if they're evaporating water, they evaporate off. The water evaporates, the pure water, but the salts are left behind, and when that's discharged to wastewater, that increases the salt. There's food processing, where they're actually using salt in the process, such as beverage and ethanol. I just was talking to City Morris, and they were talking, they've got an ethanol plant that was talking 12,000, 17,000 milligrams per liter of dissolved solids in it, so lots of solids in their waste stream. Animal rendering, domestic sources, human waste has got salts in it. We're taking in salts and discharging salts. And the big one that I'm going to focus on is the industrial and residential water treatment, and specifically with that ion exchange. If you think about, if you travel around the country, you'll see these salt mines all over. Utah, Pennsylvania, Arizona. This is one in New York. You just see these huge piles of salt around the country. U.S. is the second largest producer of salt in the world. China's first. And they produce 46 million tons of salt per year in the United States here. And that's used in a variety of different things in some of the industries that I listed. One place that I think that we see is real common around here is the softener salt. I think probably everybody in this room has either got a softener or is real familiar with how softener salt. And we see this stuff all over, and we see lots of it all over. And they bag it up in these salt mines. They bring it out. They truck it out to us. They bring it out in pallets. They bring it out in lots of pallets, and then they put it in all of our stores. So every time you see one of these salt bags or a big pallet or trucks coming in with salt, all that salt goes through the wastewater treatment plant, through the softeners process. In the softening, you get your salt. I don't know if you can see that pointer. When you get your salt, you put it in your brine tank. And the idea is that you're going to exchange sodium for calcium. And so you take this really salty water and you run it over and through this, the plastic beads or the resin. And those resins grab on to sodium because it's very high concentration that you run across it. You run sodium chloride across it or potassium chloride, but it grabs onto one of these. And then that resin bed is charged. When you put your water through that, the sodium comes off of it, and the calcium sticks, or the magnesium sticks. It's a little stronger bond, and so it wants to grab onto these hardness particles and let go of the sodium. And so that's how the softener works. Well, after time, the sites on these beads, their capacity to grab on to the hardness is no longer there, and so you have to regenerate again with this very high concentration of salt. That works great. It puts the sodium back on the beans for you, so it's ready to go. But every time you do that, the salt that you're using, I'm going to use sodium chloride, which is probably the most common, has got that chloride portion of it all also, and that goes down the drain out to the treatment plants and contributes to the salty water discharge at wastewater plants. And so this is kind of the first example of how water treatment affects wastewater plants, the salty water discharge. This is a negative impact, and is one that is leading to the problem and can cause the problem in a lot of situations. And I'm going to kind of switch gears here now and move into the wastewater side of it, explain where some of those regulations are monitoring, what a neighboring state is doing, is a little ahead of Minnesota. And then I'm going to bring it back to water treatment and explain how the water treatment can also help solve this issue or keep these salts out of the wastewater stream. I want to start with a few definitions for the excuse me, for the wastewater end, and basically this has to do with how these salts affect organisms in the waste, in the receiving stream. And so there's chronic standards, which if you think of a lake, for example, there's bugs growing in there. There's a concentration of salt. in the whole lake. And up to a certain level, everything can live, and then once you go above that level, things are going to start to either die or have effects of it. And so that's kind of the chronic standard idea. Then there's the maximum standard, which is the highest concentration over the brief time with slight. So if you were to just hit them with a little bit of chlorides or a little bit of salt in it for a short period of time, what that would do. Then we get into some of these acute values. And so if you're thinking about a wastewater discharge, when you discharge into a lake or a stream, there's right where you discharge, there's going to be a small plume of concentrated wastewater discharge. And that acute level is right there. And again, it's a flash type idea. But what can these organisms take for a short period before it dissolves with the rest of the receiving stream and kind of reduces those levels? So there's kind of the immediate type ideas, and then the chronic, what can they take over a longer period of time? And then the acute toxicity has different levels also. There's the LC50, which is lethal, and obviously that kills some of these organisms, whether it be these minnows or the daphnia, the little bugs. Or there's also the EC50, where they have an effect on whether it's reproducing or how they eat or different stuff. And this is what the regulatory agencies are interested in, keeping track of and trying to protect those organisms. Right now, the state of Minnesota has probably most of you guys monitoring for salty water discharge. That's based on what kind of stream you're discharging to, how big you are, some different parameters. And currently the water standards for chloride then are based on what you're discharging to for a receiving stream. There are standards out there right now for chlorides, but they haven't been regulated to where you guys have had to meet them. But the PCA is looking at monitoring those, seeing how big the problem is, and then start to pick off issues that they see. Again, the key salty constituents are chlorides, sulfates, and dissolved solids. Dissolved solids are a measure of all of them, so that's kind of a comprehensive look at all different salts in that. What some of the studies and different things are showing is that to drive down deeper into that, the constituents of concern are the chlorides and sulfates. They're part of the dissolved solids. Those are a little more of interest. This is the current chloride limit based on water quality classifications. So just on what the receiving stream is that you're discharging to. This is the class 2 water. There's different examples for each one. I just threw this up here for you guys to see. 230 milligrams per liter for chlorides for the chronic. So that would be what the whole stream is. The maximum, 860, and then that final acute value, that would be like your absolute maximum. If you're discharging anything over that, you're going to be causing problems with organisms, right where it hits. And so I touched on this also, but the chronic and maximum are based on national applied life criteria. So how are these bugs and organisms living? And that's always kind of a tricky little test, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's excuse me. That's what the current limits are, and I doubt many of you had to deal with those current limits. But that's what the PCA and the EPA are looking at, is trying to implement these and figure out how they're going to handle these for each municipality across the state to come under better compliance.
What was the MS again?
The maximum standard.
Can you briefly explain the classes that you have listed on right there?
Yeah, these are, I'll be honest, I don't know them all, but they're different recreational uses and stuff, and so, you know, a trout stream, would get high classification. You know, if it's a county ditch, that starts to drop in classification. And each one of your discharge permits typically lists what the classification of the receiving stream is. So they vary quite a bit. And the thing I guess I want you to know is that's the current standard. Based off information that I've talked to the PCA about, is they're going to move away from these type of standards, and they're going to go to a water quality-based effluent limit, where they actually look at the receiving stream, not just the classification, but what's in the receiving stream, what the water is across the state of Minnesota, and come up with a little more scientific approach as to how to handle chloride, sulfates, and TDS. And this is where Iowa is a few years ahead of Minnesota on the chlorides. It's interesting to look at the different state regulated agencies. I kind of mentioned that I'm licensed in 6 different states, so I try to keep up on the different issues in different states when it comes to this. And each one kind of has a parameter that they pick, and they take care of, and they figure out how they're going to deal with it, and they don't all follow the same order for that. So like in Minnesota's case, many of you have done stuff with phosphorus and nutrient removal. Iowa hasn't done that yet. However, Iowa's ahead of the chloride and salty issue, and Minnesota's just starting to do that. South Dakota, they really haven't done hardly anything with that. They're just starting to deal with ammonia a lot of times in South Dakota. Ammonia limits and that have been around for years in Minnesota. So, like I said, the MPCA is considering following the Iowa's model, and that model was developed between Iowa and the EPA. The Iowa chloride criteria is based off of this equation. Now this looks a little, tricky. But the catch here is that the higher the hardness in your receiving stream, the higher the chloride limit. If you have sulfate in your receiving stream, that's going to lower the chloride limit that you're able to discharge. For Iowa, the sulfate also varies with the hardness and the chloride. They developed a little matrix as to figure out what that is. That one's even a little more complicated than the chloride standard, so I didn't throw it up here, but I'll show you an example here in a little bit. They also set an upper limit of 2,000 milligrams per liter, with the idea that anything above that is not good for livestock or a lot of different things for that. So they've got their matrix, but then they also set a total maximum for that. Iowa's TDS criteria, basically they went through and as I kind of mentioned, they figured out that, I apologize for the typo there, but chloride and sulfate are the issues of concern. And so they essentially didn't set a TDS limit at this time for that stuff, but they're regulating chlorides and sulfates and what they're doing. So rather than have information on every receiving stream, every river, every ditch, all those different places that wastewater plants discharge to, Iowa developed what they call a state background level values. Something that they feel is pretty indicative and common of the receiving stream in Iowa, and that is 200 milligrams per liter of hardness, sulfide is 63 milligrams per liter, and chloride is 34 milligrams per liter. So if you remember, this equation, hardness, sulfates, sulfate is based on hardness, chloride. They gave the values to plug into those equations to come up with some statewide limits for chlorides. If there's site-specific data available, if there's been tests on the receiving stream itself, they'll use those. The hardness might be higher, the hardness might be lower. But many of the receiving streams, they don't have background data on, and so they wanted to set something as a baseline for the state. For sulfates, as I mentioned, it varies based on chloride hardness. This is one part of that matrix. If your hardness is less than 100, you got a sulfate standard of 5 milligrams per liter. Chloride is less than 5 milligrams per liter. If hardness is over 500, then it goes up to the maximum, and it varies in between there with a certain equation. Based off that matrix and the equations and the state standards of 200 milligrams per liter, 63 and 34, they came up with a sulfate standard on discharge of 1,513 milligrams per liter. Now, these are a lot of numbers, but I want you guys to see what the numbers are, because I'm going to relate them to a project that I worked on in St. Peter, and kind of where they sat on some of these. So to come back to Minnesota, I said that they're considering this IRA approach, and in 2009, they sent out a number of letters. I can't remember if it was 200 or 400, but they sent out a number of letters asking cities to monitor chlorides, total dissolved solids, and such. That was in order to determine the impact of salty discharges and see what the issues are out there, where people are sitting. The other thing that they've been doing, and that we've actually worked with a couple of our clients on, is a whole effluent toxicity, or the wet test. And that's a common test that wastewater plants do. They send in their wastewater, they put minnows and Ceratophrys in the water, and they see how they live, how they reproduce, and make sure everything's okay. It's a measure of anything that could be a toxic to the organisms in the water. Some have, I won't say failed, but we have a couple of clients who didn't pass with shining colors. There was some reproduction issues with the Ceratophrys that they said, okay, you need to do further testing to figure out where this is. And so that's the effluent toxicity reduction evaluation, and I'm going to go into that in the next slide. But it's basically, all right, we've got a wastewater, we don't necessarily know what's in it that's toxic to these organisms, but now we need to go through it and figure out what it is, because you're having trouble with how these organisms are reproducing. And so that's one step of how a couple of places are already dealing with the salty water discharge, and we'll touch on that on the next slide. But as Minnesota works through this regulatory approach, they're going to be coming out with compliance schedules. They're going to determine where the issues are and how they're going to set limits. And during permit permit renewals, people are going to start to see these things coming up. Timeline for that, the MPC did not have a definite timeline for how that was going to happen, but in the next 1 to 5 years, different people are going to start seeing that, and we're already seeing that with a few of our communities related to the wet test, that they're probably going to start getting regulated with this. One thing that as permit modifications come out, there's a normal compliance schedule that says here's the limit you have to meet, and by which date you got this long to implement and take care of it. The other thing that they note in there is a variance. You can apply for a variance. Right in the documents from the Pollution Control Agency on salty discharge, they say that variances will be difficult. I know there is some Department of Health, maybe some PCA, but I would get a kick out of that as they list variance and say, hey, you can try, but you're probably not going to get it. So this idea of if you fail a wet test, and this is the quickest way to dealing with salty discharges. If you fail one of these tests, there's a 6-tier approach in TRE. First, you go through data acquisition and evaluate any remedial actions that you can do. And tier 3 is where we're at with a couple of clients. We're trying to evaluate what the toxicant is. So we've got a wastewater effluent that hurts these organisms, and now let's figure out what's in it that's actually doing it. We were real sure it was salty water discharge, TDS, fluoride, something in the wastewater for both of these. One of them in southern Minnesota, we went through and did some specific testing for that. It wasn't salty water discharge. So now they think it's nitrates, and we're going through the test to check the nitrates and see if the nitrate levels are what's toxic to them. The other client out in western Minnesota, they're right now doing the testing for the salty water stuff, the TDS, and they think that's, again, where the issue is going to be. And theirs are higher, so we're a little more confident of that. Once you go through that and identify what that specific parameter is in the wastewater, then you got to evaluate treatment options, evaluate source reduction options, and I put a star by that because that's what I'm going to be talking about, and that's going to relate back to all those bags of salt I show. How can we reduce that salt that's actually going in the wastewater stream? And then tier 6 is follow-up. So if you make these changes and do all this, the MPCA wants to know that this actually made a difference and is working. And through this process, the MPCA requires quarterly reports and updates on how things are going. It's kind of an onerous process, and to just keep everything in line, all the documentation, and make sure that you know, in step 3, we're identifying and doing the correct tests to identify those toxicants. And then obviously, step 4 and 5, you also want to make sure that you're doing the right things to reduce those toxicants. So right now, we're in the monitoring stage. The PCA started in 2009. Typical frequencies are 1 per month, a 24-hour composite. They've asked for the monitor for 2 years. You know, there would be a potential to reduce that monitoring if it doesn't show that there's a problem. But that's what the MPCA is now going to work on, probably over the next 6 months, year, to figure out what is the problem and at what levels with that. So that's kind of where we're at from a regulatory standpoint. Now I'm gonna go back to this, how to keep this out of the wastewater. Solutions for lowering our self-discharge. And water treatment was one way that causes the problem, but this is also how you can help solve the problem. Changes the water treatment. Basically soften the municipal water so that your residents use less of this salt. The city of St. Peter had this in mind. They put in softening plant or a reverse osmosis water treatment plant for a variety of reasons. Their water sources were high in TDS naturally and high in hardness. And so there was a number of reasons that they wanted to implement a softening plant and use reverse osmosis to do that. One of the other reasons was nitrates, which is a primary drinking water standard. But one of the big benefits that the city of St. Peter saw was that they would also help with this salty water discharge at their wastewater plant. If they were going to spend $15 to $20 million doing a huge water upgrade, they wanted to make sure that they used technology that was forward-thinking and being proactive for these issues that the PCA was bringing up. The St. Peter treatment plant, I'm going to stock. They have 2 treatment plants. One of them we modified, their St. Julian plant, and I'm going to speak about the Broadway water treatment plant. That's a new one where we drilled 4 new wells. But those wells pump up, it goes through an aerator to oxidize the iron, basically start to form iron particles that they can filter out. It goes through a detention tank to allow time for that reaction to occur. And then at the end of that tank, they add potassium permanganate, which is another strong oxidant to help oxidize the manganese. And then it goes through gravity, green sand, and anthracite filters. These three processes up top here are basically pre-treatment for the reverse osmosis system. RO does not like iron and manganese, and it can quickly plug it up and cause problems. So we try to put in a good treatment system before that to remove those. After that, it flows down into a clear well, and this is the area where we pump out of the clear well and take it through the RO units themselves. And RO is reverse osmosis. It's a membrane. It's real similar to a piece of paper, and you use high pressure to force this water across the membrane, and it doesn't allow things like chlorides and sulfates and that through it. Those get rejected off into a reject stream. We take that clean water from the ROs and we take it to another holding tank or clear well. And then essentially that zero hardness water, it's almost pure water. It's a very high quality water. It really isn't, it's almost like dialysis water at that point. It's not needed for municipal consumption, that high quality. In fact, there's some things with it, some corrosiveness, and even some aesthetics taste. It tastes a little metallic. I always compare if you're Dasani versus Aquafina. Dasani's got dissolved minerals in it. Aquafina is more pure RO water, and the differences between those two tastes and water. For that, what we do is we blend in part of the water from the gravity filter. So we're only using a portion of the RO water, and that way we control that blend and decide what kind of hardness, how much sulfates, the different things in the drinking water we want to send out that will be acceptable to the residents and what they want to use. And so we blend RO water with filtered water to come up with the water that we're sending out. In St. Peter's case, their hardness is about 5 milligrams per liter. It starts at about 24 milligrams per liter at this facility. So we're cutting it down by 80%, essentially. So if you go back to that idea of how many bags of salt I show and how much was getting trucked into St. Peter, through public education and teaching people and helping them set the softeners lower, they're able to reduce that salt going through the wastewater plant by 80% from these sources in water treatment. RO itself removes 98 to 99% of TDS, so nearly all the salts come out. It typically recovers about 75%. In St. Peter's case, they're doing about 80% recovery. One of the things with reverse osmosis, it does have a concentrate stream, so you're concentrating all of these chlorides, sulfates, calcium, magnesium, hardness, all these dissolved solids into a separate stream. So a lot of places, they bring in the raw water, they take out the iron and manganese, and that raw water goes out to the customers. They add salt to soften it, and then it goes out to the wastewater plant. Salt goes to wastewater, salt does not get moved in the wastewater treatment plant, it goes to the river. In St. Peter's case, they take their raw water, they use RO right here to separate the dissolved solids into a separate stream, and they take that to their sanitary sewer, and they take the pure water out and deliver it to their residents. That pure water requires, if you like zero hardness water, much less softening, or as some people found, no softening. Therefore, there's no salt being added or a significant reduction in salt. People use it in their homes and then discharge it to sanitary sewer and then out to the river. So it's essentially the same raw water quality going out to the river, except we're separating the constituents in two different streams. So you take the raw water, you separate it out, you use the good stuff, and you bring it back together at the end. So the raw water quality is essentially the same quality that you're putting out at your wastewater plant. The reason I want to kind of touch on that is because if your raw water quality coming out of your wells isn't going to meet what the PCA wants you to discharge, you're pretty much in trouble. there's not a whole lot you can do. You're going to really have to work with the PCA to figure out a plan on what to do, because your raw water, you can't pump it out of the ground and discharge it to the receiving stream. In St. Peter's case, it wasn't that way, and obviously all the regulations aren't out yet, but as I'll show you, it made a significant difference in the chlorides that they're discharging. I kind of touched on that concentrate management. There is this concentrate stream that comes off of ROs that needs to be managed and taken care of, and that's a different talk, but I know Kris in the city of St. Peter, I've been working with them on how to handle that, and some of the challenges with dealing with that concentrate stream, because it's kind of a nasty water. You're concentrating all these salts to that water. Wastewater treatment plant basically matches the well water quality. The one thing about our role, and this is a number of clients, St. Peter being one, Redwood Falls, it removes more than just hardness. So there's other ways to do this, lime softening, EDR process. There's other ways to soften water, take this out. The benefit for a lot of communities is this removes more than just hardness. It takes out the other dissolved solids too, and secondary standards of dissolved solids, sulfates in drinking water. And it ultimately keeps that water out of it. So our treatment plant, the water treatment plant, went online in March of 2011. This is St. Peter's monitoring your chloride. They're bouncing around 500 up almost to 700, 400. That treatment plant went online right there, and you see that it dropped 200 to 300 milligrams per liter of chlorides. That wasn't automatic. The city did a lot of public education ahead of time, because residents aren't going to know to turn down their softeners. They sent out a lot of flyers, spent a lot of time educating public interest groups, Lions, Rotary, and that, and teaching them that this is the benefit. You're going to pay more for this water, but you're going to save softener salt. And that's an important point to this, because if you don't do public education, your residents don't know that to change when you put a new water plant online, this wouldn't change at all. But St. Peter did a nice job of that. They also offered services of local plumbers to go out and adjust these softeners for the residents. And so they saw an immediate impact. As soon as that went online, people hit the ground running with education and getting plumbers out. They saw a 200 to 300 milligram per liter drop in that chloride. So the chlorides came down. We weren't monitoring for sulfate, so I don't have a sulfate example. The TDS stayed approximately the same. Now, TDS chlorides are part of the TDS, and you would have thought that those would have also dropped by about the same amount. However, the new wells that we drilled up at this new plant were higher in TDS to begin with, so it basically matches the new raw water quality that we have. So we didn't see that same drop in TDS. I'm going to go back now to that Iowa. This is just an example. This isn't where Minnesota's setting it, but I kind of want to leave you guys with a frame of reference for that of 629 and 389, and then that Minnesota value of 230 that we have right now. Here's where Iowa's standard of acute and chronic were sitting. So the chronic was right here. And Peter did okay on the acute. They weren't above that, but for the last 2 years, they would have had Iowa violations. And that made a huge difference to drop that amount, and now they're underneath that. The catch is that if Minnesota is around that 230, which is in here, they're still hanging right around that mark. So that might take further public education and some evaluations to see if they can go below that. But if Minnesota follows the Iowa example, it's most likely that the changes that St. Peter made at their water plant has already solved their wastewater salt discharge issue with regards to chlorides. Takeaway that I want you guys to remember from this is source control is a top priority in reducing salts. You can't control the geology, you can't control your raw water, but you do have some control over how much salt goes in to your wastewater stream through home water softeners, industries and that's really where this MPCA regulation is going to be met, is through the source control. I know water treatment can both causes the problem and help solve the problem of salty water discharges. And then the water treatment plant upgrades are an excellent method of source control. I think the thing here is to be proactive. So if people are looking at water treatment plant upgrades, they need to be thinking about this. And because we're in the wastewater track, and I know many of you do both water and wastewater, you got to also educate, put on two hats. Your water treatment is now going to start affect your wastewater treatment more so than in the past. And that when you're looking at treatment plant upgrades, to be thinking about using more advanced technologies to improve this. And then if you do advanced technologies, you need to educate the public, industries, and make sure that less salt is used in your treatment plant. There's my contact. I'll open any questions you guys would have on this.